Welcome back to PRN Test Drive. I'm your host Nile, and this is the 2025 Nissan Murano Platinum all-wheel drive. Now, the previous third generation Murano was in production longer than this show has been on the air. It started production in November 2014 and didn't finish until the end of 2024. Now, this new generation is still built on the Nissan D platform, but it really modernizes this mid-size crossover. And despite there being fewer vehicles in this segment to compete with, the Murano now really does stand out as a true class leader when it comes to the other vehicles. So today we're going to be talking about the price, specifications, and everything else you need to know if you're in the market for this mid-size crossover. Let's get started. Alright, so let's talk about pricing. Now, our Platinum is the top end trim, but if you're looking for the entry level, the SV, that starts around $46,000 and change Canadian, or about $40,000 in the US. Go up to the SL, the mid trim, you're looking at about $50,000 Canadian, or about $46,000 in the US. And then going up to our Platinum all-wheel drive trim here, this is the top trim, fully loaded, all the features you could hope for. We're looking at $57,478 Canadian, or $52,255 in the US. That's with delivery as well as the options and this two-tone paint color. In the US, it costs more money for paint. I don't know why, but it always seems to. Now, when a vehicle like the third generation Murano has been on the market for as long as it had been, people start to become pretty comfortable with what it has to offer. So when change comes, they're a little resistant towards it. This now uses a 2-liter variable compression 4-cylinder engine, producing 241 horsepower, 260 pound-feet of torque. The previous generation used the same V6 engine that it had been using for a very, very long time, and those numbers are actually switched. It had 260 horsepower, 240 pound-feet of torque. Now, the other major mechanical difference between this, which I think will be the saving grace for those who wanted that V6 power but are not too comfortable going down to a 4-cylinder, you no longer have to deal with the Xtronic CVT that Nissan was famous or infamous for using. This is now using a 9-speed automatic transmission, pretty much the same one that we're seeing across the board on other Nissan models like the popular Nissan Pathfinder. Now, the design of the new Nissan Murano is wildly different from what we've seen from the previous generation. It kind of has the same silhouette, but when it comes to the front end design, it really is inspired by the electric Aria that we featured a couple times. Up front, we have the Ultra Crystal Cube LED headlights. The V-Motion graphic, which Nissan says they're famous for, is produced by the LED daytime running lights that are now hidden inside the grille. I think it's got a sharp design to it, with the little Murano badge to the right or driver's side of the grille area, separating the hood with the rest of the vehicle. I mean, small touches like that I think are pretty cool. Plus, with the two-tone look, you got the lower black, teal on the inside, and then black roof up top. It's a pretty striking and unforgettable look to it, and I'm telling you, I've driven a lot of fun cars over the past few months. This one seems to be generating the most head turns out of everything I've driven. People are not only interested by it, but I think they're quite taken aback that this is how good a Murano could look. As I mentioned at the beginning of this video, this still uses the Nissan D platform that the previous generation was built on, meaning the wheelbase of 111.2 inches is the same between the two vehicles. And it is pretty reminiscent to the Aria design language. Again, like we talked about with the front, the side profile very similar to that vehicle as well, although being a mid-size, it is a bigger design. The overall length has increased a little bit, and then the width has gotten about 2.6 inches wider. The only thing that's missing on this vehicle, considering the Murano is now being positioned more as like a premium offering in the mid-size space, is 4-door keyless entry. It's only on the front doors, which is something that some of the other brands in this segment are doing. Outback is easily my favorite part of this vehicle. The design back here is sharp. Even though the lights just turned off, you can see on the B-roll that there is this 3-dimensional design to the actual taillights that run the full width of the rear. I like it quite a bit. They're very unique, and you won't mistake this vehicle for anything else on the road. A couple other things to note: we have the hidden wiper up top underneath the rear spoiler. Then we also have a kick-activated trunk with the key fob, as you would expect. But again, on the Platinum trim, this is something that you would want to have. And then given that this is a mid-size vehicle with only 2 rows, the space back here is ample. Easily be able to fit all of your groceries and whatever else you might need to be doing in the back here. You have the ability to fold the seats flat. There's some hinges here to be able to pull it, and it'll unlock it. You still got to push it down. And then there is a little bit of storage underneath the floor with the tire inflator kit. Now, that's something else that's going to be important for some buyers. There's no spare tire with this vehicle anymore, much like a lot of the other vehicles on the market now. That has been replaced with the tire inflator kit. The inside of the Murano is quite a lovely place to be as well. We have the heated, ventilated, and massaging front seats. These are the zero gravity seats that Nissan has been using for quite some time. Extremely comfortable, especially on longer drives. We also have driver memory, and these 12.3-inch dual displays are a much needed refresh from the previous generation. Again, very similar to what we've seen on the Area. In fact, the Area design language continues throughout the rest of the interior, as we do have the capacitive touch button HVAC system that we did see on that vehicle with the faux wood trim that goes around. Kind of wraps around the dashboard area, and it looks very elegant. We also have the Murano Glass Dash Finisher, which is a unique trim that runs along the top portion of the HVAC area here and gives the vehicle not only its name, that's where the Murano name comes from, was this Murano glass, but also gives the vehicle a unique, distinctive look to it. You know, depending on how the light hits it, will give it this sort of unique look, and it really does blend in well with the rest of the interior because we've got three different colors here: black, beige, and brown. It really does tie the vehicle all in very nicely. But we have all the features that you would really expect to find on this: 360-degree cameras, and finally good cameras at that. A head-up display, home link. We have a wireless phone charger, 2 USB-C ports you can connect your phones to at the front, and then a push-button shifter system. There's no more regular gear shifter. It really does make a little bit more space in the center here for your 2 cup holders, and then sort of a compartment tray along with your armrest. Now, there's one thing to note. I have a dash cam that plugs in usually to USB-A, and I found that recently every vehicle I test will try to use it as a computer, so I have to plug it in either to the 12 volt or find a charge only port. The 2 USB ports up the front here are computer ports. Effectively, my dash cam won't work, which means it has to go into the back because there's no 12 volt outlet on the interior of this vehicle. Even in the second row, you don't have anything. So it's a small detail, but something that could be important, especially if you do have a dash cam that might only be able to plug in that way. So running it to the back there means I've got a cable that's running across the entire center of the vehicle. Not ideal, but again, something that might not affect everybody. Now, don't worry, the rear seats haven't been neglected. For the first time on the Murano, the rear seats also have the zero gravity seating, and they are pretty comfortable. I'm seated behind my passenger here, which sits a little bit further forward than I would, but I could probably fit behind myself. Nissan says with the new seat design overall, you do get a little bit more knee room, so it might be more comfortable for passengers on longer trips, especially if you're an adult. Now, I am 6 foot tall. I am cresting the headliner here with my head. If I were to sit back, a little bit more space, but for the most part, not too bad overall. We have heated seats back here, air vents in the center, as well as these side window sunshades. And Nissan says also that these doors open quite a bit wider than the previous generation, making it easier to get maybe a car seat or kids into the back of this vehicle. That's something that we will talk about when we take it on the road. I want to talk about the demographics, the people who are buying this vehicle. We'll go over that as well as everything else you need to know as we hit the road in the 2025 Nissan Murano Platinum. All right, my friends, we're off in the 2025 Nissan Murano. I filmed at a good time because look, it's starting to rain. I didn't get too wet when I was outside, just kind of in between shots there, but nothing too bad. But now it's coming down. So let's first talk about the fuel efficiency. We completed this 100 kilometer test loop in eco mode. There are 3 modes: standard, sport, and eco, in 8 liters per 100 kilometers. In the lower third below, you'll see the US miles per gallon. Now, how does that compare? There aren't many vehicles in this segment to compare to, but we did the Honda Passport a little while ago, and that completed it in 8.7 liters per 100 kilometers. Similar power numbers. That is using a V6 though. So you can see there is a pretty good advantage, at least fuel efficiency wise, to be using a smaller displacement engine with a variable compression. You know, effectively, it's able to ramp up and give you a little bit more power, a little bit better compression for power, and a little bit better compression for efficiency, depending on how you're driving the vehicle. So I've kept it in standard mode, and to be fair, I haven't driven the previous generation Murano. I mean, I might have driven one at some point in my life. It would have been the same one because it's been around for so long. The V6, again, with similar power numbers, should have felt about the same as this. So I think if that's your number one concern going up to this vehicle because it's got a smaller engine, don't, because everybody else is doing it. We've talked about that quite a bit over the years, that's just the direction, unfortunately, that we're going in. Some like it, some don't. Personally, I prefer fuel efficiency, so I am happy with smaller displacement, more powerful engines, but something to note. Now let's touch a little bit on the competition. I mentioned the Honda Passport because that is a two-row mid-size vehicle. The other vehicles that I can think of that are the most comparable to this would be the Chevrolet Blazer. That is a two-row vehicle. We also have the Toyota Crown Signia. Now the Crown Signia is really more of a premium vehicle, but so is the Murano. That is what the target for this is, at least according to Nissan. But the other vehicles that are in this segment, the mid-size two-row segment, I don't really consider them. Something like the Mazda CX-70, it's the same dimensions as a CX-90, which is a three-row, so it's not really a true two-row. And then even something like the Jeep Grand Cherokee, I mean, you can get the Jeep Grand Cherokee L, I know it's longer, but effectively that's the three-row version of that vehicle. So the only other car, the only other SUV in this segment that existed at some point was the Ford Edge. That was discontinued a few years ago, which is kind of strange because this is a relatively popular segment and there's just slightly fewer options now. But I mean, I guess they're about the same if you consider, you've got the CX-70, which I don't consider, as well as the Crown Signia. But anyway, not getting too off topic here, where does this fit into buyers? Because here's why you might notice the majority of people driving a mid-size two-row crossover, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's everybody, so don't get into the comments and get all upset that you're in your 30s and you drive a vehicle like this, but for the most part, it is the older generation, people in their 60s to 80s that are driving these, and here's why, folks. If you are a young person, such as myself, you have a family, you're looking for something to put your kids in, well, you've got a couple options. If you're like me and a responsible person for the planet and only had one child and not adding to the population overdensity that we have, then a compact crossover like a Nissan Rogue would be perfect. You put one kid in the back, maybe you have an adult here or there, you're good to go. Everything fits in your trunk like stroller, baby seat in the back seat, no matter what, a compact vehicle will fit. It's affordable, it's relatively fuel efficient, the overall insurance costs aren't too bad overall, and when you're parking at places, whether it's in a smaller house because you're just starting off or in a condo parking area, it fits a little bit easier. Or you have too many kids, more than three, you need a minivan. Minivan has 3 rows of seating, can have up to like 8 passengers. It's somewhat affordable, a little bit bigger in space, but overall costs, proportionately, depending on how much you want to spend in terms of features, but it is the next best option to a compact crossover. So families aren't going to be looking at a pricier mid-size vehicle just to get a bit of extra legroom for your kids that you're not too worried about because they're small, and more trunk space which you're not too worried about because you don't put tons of stuff in there. The people who have a little bit more disposable income and would like to have a larger feeling vehicle because it makes them feel safer, makes them feel more comfortable, are the people that have cashed out their $1 million, $2 million houses in the greater Toronto area and moved outside of the area and bought a little house and now have millions of dollars to spend. They'll go and buy these kinds of vehicles with cash. The majority of them do because they can, and that's fine. The thing is, though, Nissan doesn't want to target those people. Nissan says that this is more targeted towards, say, a young female professional, somebody who's just gotten a promotion at work, maybe like a mid-level manager. They want to treat themselves to something that is a little bit fancier, a little bit flashier, a lot more comfortable than your usual crossover or sedan, and then enter into this mid-size vehicle. So that's the target, at least, that they're looking for. Whether or not that pans out is to be seen, because I really do think that the majority of the people that are buying the mid-size crossover segment are people that are about 50 years older than me. And it's true, because the people who have been looking at this vehicle, the people that have been breaking their necks, whether they're walking by my house or as I'm driving along and they turn their heads as they're driving, they are on the older side of the scale. But that's fine. Everybody needs a car. But I'm not saying that you shouldn't consider it if you are a younger person, because there are some great features about this. I mean, first of all, the ride has been great. It's very smooth, very comfortable, very quiet as well. It's nice to have a quiet vehicle, especially if you do have kids. The overall space is great as well. I mean, I'm extremely comfortable here, even though I find that the windows do sit a little high, so it feels a little silly. I put my arm up on there. I'm usually keeping it in the little nook. And it's fine, especially a big dude like me. I'm 6 foot tall, I'm huge. I find that these vehicles sometimes can be a little tight. Not this. This has been excellent. So I've been quite impressed overall with this vehicle. Engine performance, not bad at all. If I were to gun it, takes a second really to figure out which gear it needs to be in, but that's one nice thing about having actual gears. So that's one major plus buying this over the previous generation, is a proper automatic transmission versus the CVT that was on there before. This is just like miles better. I can't even explain how much better it is. I hate to be the guy, just like every other journalist, that hates CVTs, but there's a time and place for them. But with something like this, a bigger vehicle, you're going to want to have a proper automatic transmission. All-wheel drive works great. I have no complaints about it. And then really, I mean, the rest of the vehicle has worked exactly the way that it should. I haven't had any issues with it. It's been quiet. There's no rattles. It's got, 6,500 kilometers on it, so it's still pretty new overall. But I have to say that we have driven some vehicles that were a lot less mileage than this, and we're already starting to rattle and make some noises. So I'd say build quality is great on this. It's built in the US, so we've mentioned it a couple times now. Could be a tariff problem for us up here in Canada, but at least at this point, it seems to be relatively affordable. And when you compare it to the other vehicles in this segment, again, specifically things like the Chevrolet Blazer or Honda Passport, they are pretty much in line in terms of pricing. So you're getting, I'd say, a great value, a strikingly good looking vehicle, and something that's really comfortable to get everything done in. But this is now a vehicle in the segment that you definitely should be considering, as long as you don't need a 12-volt outlet and you don't need to recline the rear seats. The seats fold flat, but there's no reclination, so you can't adjust that. Something that we talk about, especially when Victor's doing his reviews on the vehicles. He gets into the back seats and checks those, so your passengers back there are not going to be quite as comfortable as they could be. But then again, I really do think the people who are buying this vehicle not going to be putting too many people in the back seat. It's going to be one or two people in the main seats up here, and when you put on those massage functionality, you forget about everybody else. But as always, if you have any questions about the 2025 Nissan Murano or anything else that we're doing here at Test Drive, please get into the comments below. We do get back to everybody. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, then we really encourage you to do so. We'd love to have you on board. We appreciate you watching, and until next time, take care.